Hey, it's John in Firing Room 1, and we're here for the first launch of a crewed Starliner mission, and only a minute and 20 seconds away.
120. OCU's armed. SCS
Stick
down
around
started.
after the launch.
EDS
I'm going to
Starliner
hopefully
launch
show you
armed
guys a
auto.
few things, and something you've probably never seen before, and definitely something you've never heard before.
Last arm
So,
auto. Roger.
So in about a minute, we're going to
call
fire
meaning
off the
if
first
the emergency
crewed
detection system on Atlas detects something.
mission
Rock report
intended
range
to
status.
eventually head to the
Range
moon. Something my dad did several times.
POP started.
He was a Apollo launch controller,
It
and
will
he
trigger the launch abort
launched
system
Apollo
on
8,
Starliner
9,
and fire
10,
automatically.
11,
If that happened, the
12,
spacecraft would
and
push
then
itself
16
away
and
from the
17.
rocket a mile up
He
and a
followed
mile
up
out.
with
Atlas at flight fresh.
Skylab 2, 3, and 4. And we're going to talk about that after the fact, so stick around.
30.
Hopefully you
Sensor at
appreciate
flight
it, and
press.
hopefully this thing goes off in 20 seconds, and I'm going to sit back and
25.
listen.
Status check. Go Atlas. Go Centaur. Go Starliner. Godspeed, Butch and Sonny.
Ten, nine,
9,
eight,
8,
seven,
7, 6,
6,
5, 4,
four,
3, 2,
two,
1, ignition!
ignition,
Liftoff!
and liftoff of Starliner and Atlas V, carrying
Woo!
2 American heroes, drawing a line to the stars for all of us.
Wow. Wow.
Commander Butch Wilmer there. Calling down
Atlas
to
is a
Mission Control
very
here in
reliable
Houston. The
rocket.
spacecraft has begun rolling into the
There's
right
no
attitude
surprise
for
this
its
thing's
passing.
doing
The
good.
guidance navigation and control officer here in the room, seeing good data on that.
Only difference being it's the first crewed Atlas rocket since Gemini? Or, no, since Mercury.
Starliner passing through max Q, or the point of maximum dynamic pressure where
First
forces
crewed-
of air friction are highest.
to my
which
knowledge,
will
first
shortly be
crewed,
passing through Mach 1, where the speed of sound.
Atlas product since the Mercury program. Project Mercury is a film that I've been working on for 8 years now in early development, or maybe it's not early since it's been 8 years, but still in development. We got a working screenplay, but it's a story that kind of tells us exactly why
Looking good with speeds and
they
attitude
changed
increasing as expected. Coming
the
up in less
NASA
than 20
project
seconds,
called
the solid rocket
Project
boosters
Astronaut
will
to
run out of fuel and burn out.
Project Mercury, the god of commerce and thieves. Strange god of commerce and thieves. I mean, it is the first planet in the solar system,
Now the
so
fuel
that would
for the
make
solid
sense
rocket
if
boosters
they had
has
only
been
made
depleted.
the
Atlas
second
main booster stage will
mission,
be continuing
Gemini,
its
they had
burn
made
for
that
about the
Venus
next
or something
3
like that. That
minutes.
might make sense, but
Good handle. Good handle.
That call, good handle from Capcom Joshua
Wow,
Boudreaux,
we're getting
indicating that
close
the crew now
to
has
set.
the ability to initiate an abort manually if needed. All looking
This
good
is good.
so far. Now 2 minutes into
Boosters.
flight and coming up on the solid rocket booster jettison at the 2-minute and 40-second
Awesome.
mark.
Man, these astronauts must be excited right now.
Doing that good trajectory. CLG.
The solid rocket boosters have now been jettisoned. after
Kind of like
seeing
the
Starliner
equivalent
through its
of
first 90 seconds of
Apollo
flight.
8, if you think
Team on the
about
ground
it.
here confirming that it was a good jettison and that the
First
vehicle's
crewed
trajectory continues to look good.
Capsule,
Now at 3 minutes into
you know,
today's
in
flight.
the Artemis program, very similar to the first crewed capsule in the Apollo program, and our father launched that in late 1968, the year I was born. I actually turned 11 months old during the return trip from Apollo 11.
Atlas booster now throttling back to limit the G-forces on Butch and Sunny, trying to limit that to around 3.5 times the force they feel while on the ground.
Wow. 4.5 minutes in, and we are. This is why I love SpaceX launches, because you don't really get the sim, you get the real thing these days, including the re-entry. Hey, yeah, there you go. Look at that. And it looks like 2 engines are working.
Staging.
Here in the ground.
Decals open. You have sublimator rock.
Wow. 5 minutes in,
Team on the ground reporting the
just over, what,
They saw the
halfway?
ascent cover on top of Starliner that's been protecting the spacecraft's docking system through its climb into orbit. They saw that jettison as planned.
This is cool.
Staging was good. You have good control.
And now the second stage's 2 Centaur engines have ignited to continue pushing Starliner into space, fueled by liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen.
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize
Next
it, but
milestone
there
that we'll be
were
watching for is the aeroskirt
a
jettison.
substantial number of Apollo missions devoted to just working out the equipment, taking it into space, making sure it worked. Some of the guys got a good close-up of the moon during those training missions, but Apollo 8, 9, 10,
Starliner, yeah, good.
they all
Booster
did
performance.
significant,
You're up to plus 31.
work, testing out translunar injection, testing out the use of the lunar module and docking
Atlas
and
control reporting booster performance offset
all
of
that stuff.
31 seconds of ISP, or specific impulse,
The
relative to its design baseline of around 400.
same thing this thing's doing, but this is going to dock with ISS, I believe, and very similar. Other than ISS is much larger than a LEM. The most interesting of the Apollo launches, and most people don't know this, is Apollo 9. One of the things I'm going to save for the end of this launch, after we get into orbit and the 0G indicator, this guy, yeah, that guy right there. We'll see if he hits the ceiling floating around. He's like, oh yeah, I'm floating around today. Nothing's stopping me from floating around today. In fact, I'm going to bring you over because they're getting close.
Capcom Joshua Kutrick continuing to pass good news up to Starliner's crew.
He's
Last one reporting that the Centaur upper stage remains in good condition and is performing well, pushing them into orbit.
pushing them to orbit. Yeah, Apollo 9 training mission. They on their list of tasks, similar to 2 Gemini missions, they on their task list had a job of imaging North Africa,
in this case, just
in particular North West Africa. And you got to wonder, like, why are they filming the Earth at all, really, since they were really testing out the Apollo craft itself. And the NASA Earth missions didn't really start till the 70s, I think, where they started documenting the Earth very well from space, and thank God for that. Thank NASA and all the people that made that happen. My favorite software product is Google Maps and Google Earth. You can go anywhere in a matter of minutes. Seconds.
11:52, 34 seconds.
Is that
Cool.
call letting the crew know that the
Yeah,
engine
and
cutoff
Apollo
in
9,
Waco
they
should happen just about on time, about 12 minutes into today's flight.
imaged some
Another good
very
indication that
interesting
Starliner's asset is
locations
ticking
in
along exactly as
Northwest
expected.
Africa, and when you
Station's
realize
main
what
engine
they were
cutoff is a major
filming, you're
milestone,
gonna
marking
actually know
Starliner's
why they
arrival on orbit.
named Apollo Apollo. Yeah, you
Still
should
got
stick
about
around.
2.5 minutes until we get to that. With the spacecraft continuing to perform well, make its way towards orbit.
To make a long story short, these astronauts on their task list when they were filming North Africa, they actually filmed the original location of the Temple of Apollo, or Temple of Apollo. Yeah, sure.
Once the main engine
In
cut off, the
Mauritania,
next step will be
and
the launch vehicle separation.
that's the
set to
sad
occur just short of 15 minutes
fact
after
of the
launch,
matter
when
is
Starliner will
there's
separate from the
a lot
rocket
of
and fly
history
free
stuck in
space for
North
the first time.
Africa, and the higher ups at NASA, Werner von Braun in particular, knew that North Africa was very rich in our common ancestral past. A lot of our ancestors all of our
Flight
ancestors,
Dynamics
I
officer
believe, came
reporting
from
that at this
Africa,
point,
but
Starliner
some of our
ignition
ancestors
mission
came from
primary
Africa
launch
sooner than you
entirely.
think. And West Africa will soon be
And
the
they're, again,
the
all
center
continuing well, so
of
we're not
much
expecting to
attention
leave
due
that
to
aboard.
the fact that many
As Starliner is
cultures and
rapidly approaching orbital
nations
velocities,
migrated out of
regions only
Northwest
available
Africa
for
in a
just
mass
over 1
exodus
minute,
back in
where Starliner would just continue up to orbit
between
after
like
that.
3000 and 1000 BC. And some of our friends at NASA knew this back then. I don't know if any of them know that now, but they will if they haven't been reading their messages lately. This is great. Not too much longer.
30 seconds, D'Amico.
Just 30 seconds to go. Now until main engine
Very
cutoff,
different
marking Starliner's arrival on orbit.
orbital insertion setup compared to like a SpaceX rocket. Essentially a two-stage rocket. Wish we had real imagery. Yeah, speaking of imagery, I'm not going to show you the imagery taken by the two Gemini missions and the crew of Apollo 9, but it is posted on the Firing Room 1 site.
And with that nominal
or-
MECO call, that's main engine
and,
cutoff.
you
We've
can
got
go
good
take a
energy,
look.
meaning a good velocity.
Or you can
meaning
just
continued
Google
orbit, and a good plane, meaning Starliner's trajectory is aligned
Northwest
with the
Africa NASA images
International Space Station
and
for
Apollo
rendezvous
and Gemini, and
tomorrow.
you'll
And with that, Butch Wilmore
can
and
start
Tony
to get a
Williams return
picture
to
of
orbit, and
what it
eventually we will
is
both
that
experience
Werner
the
had them
session.
trying to
5 to 14.
image based on some old German maps of West Africa. Really old
They're both
German
very
maps of
experienced astronauts with a
the
combined
world,
total of
actually,
489
but
days in
in
space
West
between
Africa
them.
in
Starliner's
particular,
also the third
very
spacecraft that
special
they've
place near
launched
and
in.
dear
Both have
to
traveled to the International
virtually
Space
everybody
Station
on
via
this
space
planet.
shuttles and Soyuz, and are now well on their way to repeating the journey via Starliner. It's also worth noting that
I'm
Williams'
really
role
glad to know
as
where it
pilot
is.
marks the first time that a woman has crewed a flight
And it
test
makes
of an
everything
orbital
make sense,
spacecraft.
guys.
Just a few seconds ago, you
Make
heard
a long
Captain
story short,
Joshua Kucher calling up to Butch and
I
Sunny.
grew up in a household where my father launched the first and last man to the moon.
With
And
the
my
expected
entire
time,
life,
Starliner will separate from Centaur
everybody
about
around me talked about
14
the moon
minutes,
conspiracy and how it
52
never happened.
seconds into flight.
So it was like my father's
Just
life
under
never happened.
2 minutes from now, or 1
And,
minute from now.
or if it did happen, his career, it was all fake and everything's fake.
That is actually the
Just
last
like the news
major
today.
milestone for Starliner's
So,
ascent. All the hard work is done, but we need for Starliner to be
setting
flying
all
on its
those
own before we
conspiracy
begin
theories
heading towards the
aside,
International
like
Space Station. There's a slight pause in the action
individuals
here
like
while
Joe Rogan
Centaur
still
repressurizes
believe
and does some
in, like
attitude
what
control.
grade are you in, Joe?
We'll get into the right
I had third
orientation to
graders
send
making
Centaur
fun
on
of
its way
me,
and then
you know,
jettison
because
it
they
and
didn't
move
believe
into
my
the right
dad launched the
orientation for
first and last
orbital
man to the
insertion
moon or
burn,
any rockets for
which
that
will come
matter.
about 31 minutes into
But
flight.
I moved to New York and people in New York had no idea what a rocket was, I think, at that point in time. The Rockettes, maybe. Joe would be into the Rockettes. He's probably been to the Rockettes. I have not been to the Rockettes, but I would like to go to Radio City Music Hall. It's an awesome Art Deco building, which Art Deco is well represented in the Project Mercury film, by the way, whenever it does get greenlit. Yeah, we go way back to NACA. Like before NASA, there was NACA.
And about
And
10
the people
seconds
there were
until an expected
the ones that
launch
conceived
vehicle separation.
Project Astronaut, and conveniently was changed to Project Mercury. And film addresses the reasons why, among other issues. Yeah! That stage looks really cool, by the way. It looks like a space-based super weapon, like Star Wars. Something I would have been working on had the Challenger
And
not
now that
exploded.
Starliner has separated from this Centaur upper stage. We have a big thank
I'd
you to our partners
interviewed
at
in
ULA, providing Butch
my
and Sunny
senior
a
year
smooth
to
ramp
work for the Air
to
Force
space.
at Slick 6 in Vandenberg,
That is
California,
not the end of today's
where
orbit
the Air
activity,
Force
though.
was
The team will now be
basically
getting ready for the
doing
orbital
Star
insertion
Wars
burn, which comes 31 minutes after
weapons
flight. So that's still about 15
deployment
minutes
testing
away
into
now.
LEO. They're going to test actual working electromagnetic drives, and you've seen them in the news, no surprise, and other interceptor technologies, as their main goal was to intercept the barrage of nuclear weapons from Russia. Well, sadly, that's not in place, and sadly, Russia's going to do what it's been planning on doing for a couple of years, because you see the oracles of the Temple of Apollo. They prophesize the end of the world. The Pythian oracles, and the Pythian oracles predicted that a man named Putin means like a snake.
Once again,
And in particular,
Starliner
the
with,
sweet smell of death
astronauts
that
Butch Wilmore
is
and Sunny
around
Williams on
after
board, launched
the
from
snake has
Florida,
eaten its prey,
Cape
and
Canaveral,
it's
Cape
just
Canaveral
rotting in its
Space Force
stomach.
Station, launch pad 41 at
And that what
9:52 a.m.
Putin
Central,
meant. You can
10:52
Google
a.m.
it,
Eastern
the
today,
oracles
and
of
they have now
Apollo, and read about Putin. But Putin, 3,000 years ago, when the oracles were prophesying the end of the earth, is someone they predicted would destroy it. Coincidence? Yeah, you should go to Wikipedia and start Googling Apollo, who
With
Apollo
the
really
call
was,
for good targeting,
where the temples of
and
Apollo really
information about
are,
Starliner's, TDRS
at the
schedule
tip
being
of the
good
eye of
means that,
Odin,
we've
which
got
is what
good
the locals call the
communication
Eye
with
of
the ground.
Sahara.
TDRS is the
It's
tracking
been called the
relay
Eye
and
of Odin
satellites
ever
that
since they kicked the
Starliner
Egyptians
uses,
out in
to
like
talk to the ground.
3000 BC.
And
Used to be called the Eye of
flight
Horus,
controllers
but
on the ground are seeing the dynamic.
Go ahead.
Eye of Horus is simply a geological,
You can relay a message to our brethren at ULA.
an artistic cartographer's representation of the geology of like Mauritania and Western Sahara.
They've been a member of the family for a
Blue
long
lines are
time.
rivers. The eye is the Eye of Sahara, as you know it.
And we wanna
The
welcome
pupil
them.
is the 900 square mile lake that used to fill the iris, as they used to call it, and in West African Portuguese, they used to call it, or the iris, they used to call that Osiris. So the phrase Osiris represents the actual like Eye of Sahara. or the iris of it
Copy
anyway.
tablets, we're with you.
And that is where the capital city of the original Egypt was. And
So the
before climate change
have
destroyed
their
West
tablets
Africa,
out,
and
so no longer
and
using the
war
paper
happened, and
procedures. Now that the
in
vehicle
fact,
has
World War Zero, I guess
stopped
you might
moving
call
so
it,
quickly.
happened. The Boer Blick War happened back then, and some call it the Passover War.
So there's a handful of things
Some
that the
call it
crew's gonna do
Ragnarok,
now. Mostly
but
just prepare
the 10 different countries that
the
were
inside of the
in and
cockpit, so
around
they are
Mauritania
looking at the
back,
right data to
between
prepare for the
3000 and
upcoming
1000
orbital insertion
BC,
burn.
warred many,
The
many,
vehicle
many
itself
times. And
has done a few
the
things
last
recently.
war, Boer
Started
Blick,
power on the
in
solar
the
arrays on the back of Starliner,
1300s,
and turning off several of
is the war that actually freed the West African
thrusters
Hebrews, which
that are
is
no
what
longer
we're going to
needed,
get into later.
at this phase of flight.
Well, we're not going to get into it later, but I'm going to tell you how I know anyway.
Upcoming in about
If you just
4
go
minutes, Starliner
to
is going to
either Firing Room
start
1
to
on the internet,
orient
or if
itself
you go
in the
to
direction it
West
needs
African
to
Genesis,
do the orbital insertion burn.
you can read
The crew
about
inside
how
the
the
vehicle will be turning the
actual
wireless
events of
access point
Genesis,
on, and allow
a
them to
historical
stream some of the data
document.
from
The books of
spacecraft
Moses is a
onto
historical
their
document,
procedure
but how
tablets.
they actually took place in West Africa. And that is
And Houston Starliner,
where we're heading here in
alarm
just a
is
few
on.
minutes,
Backup
because
control switches enable one on, enable
you need to
one
know
SMRCS.
that a long time ago in this galaxy, not far away, like here in the United States, that people knew that West Africa was the location of the books of Genesis and much myth from other cultures. A lot of those things happened. You know, the names, places were changed, and people personified mountains and lakes and rivers and turned them into gods or beasts, serpents.
UDX.
The Kraken is just a volcano off the coast of Africa called Fogo in the Cape Verde Islands, which caused many, many tsunamis, including the big one. And this knowledge base was pretty secure back in the 60s. And to make a long story short, one of those individuals that was well versed in where the original promised land was one Werner von Braun.
Things will be pretty quiet as Starliner gets into position for the orbital insertion burn. That's still about 10 minutes away.
Orbital
Starliner is actually
insertion.
designed to be pretty autonomous, and in fact docked with the space station on its last trip around without the help of any crew on board. But we do still want to know that if needed, Butch Wilmore and Sonny Williams could take control and manually abort the spacecraft's approach to the station if they needed to. So to prove that, one of the few things on their agenda after they reach orbit will be to perform a test of the manual piloting mode.
This test will involve first pointing Starliner's nose towards the Earth so that its communication antenna on the back of the service module is pointed at the satellites, the teeter satellites that allow it to communicate with the team on the ground. They'll then move Starliner so that its solar arrays are pointed at the sun,
Yeah,
showing
so
they can
to
charge
recap,
Starliner's internal batteries as needed.
as we
They'll
watch
follow
this
that up
silly
with a
animation
demonstration
going through space,
of the star trackers, one of the ways that Starliner determines where it is in space.
temples of
Pointing
Apollo
Starliner away
are on the
from
tip
Earth
of
so
the
that
Eye of
system,
Sahara.
Vesta system,
There's a couple of
can get a good look at
mountains
the stars.
right at the tip, and the
Next step will
actual
be for the crew to
original
manually speed
temples
Starliner
from
up and then slow back down, which will slightly
like
raise
3000
and lower
BC,
their orbit, prove that
2000
they could manually
BC
break away from the orbit
are
that the
scattered
space station is
in and
if they
around
needed
the
to.
Eye of Sahara.
At that point, they can move on to the
And
last items of the
the
test.
Greeks and Romans
You're in a
and
good config. It's 74 degrees in there.
Hebrews, among some other groups, their cultures originate in West Africa, 3000 BC. 3000
Okay, great.
BC,
We're
or
on the way to
just
press the line.
a little bit earlier than that, is when climate change started destroying Northwest Africa, and people started migrating away, including the
Dietrich
Egyptians. They
calling
were
up
among the
that,
first,
the
and they
crew could ignore
migrated
some,
to East Africa and
alarms
and
are
settled
seeing on
in the New Egypt. So
temperatures inside
it should
the
really be called
Starliner.
New
That's
Egypt, and
just
Mauritania
a
should be
result
called
of one of the sensors
Egypt
being next
or
to a light that's causing it to show higher than it
Proto-Egypt
actually
or
is.
something
But
like
it sounds
that.
like the crew are pretty comfortable and are
The
getting into place for that orbital
the
insertion.
people from that Egypt were the
As I
people that
was saying,
enslaved the
after they
Hebrews
have
of the
manually
Ukar
broken away
Basin.
from the orbit of, proven that they can manually break away from the orbit of the space station, they are going to move on to the last items of their test for tonight. That's manually moving Starliner into the right orientation for re-entering the atmosphere, and then moving back into the attitude that will let them soak up some sun with the solar arrays and try a different method of manually charging the spacecraft's batteries. But again, once that all has to wait until after the orbital insertion burn. This is again the first of several burns that will put Starliner on its way to the International Space Station. We've still got about 6.5 minutes until we fire up the engines for that burn.
Starliner, we did not see the hand controller deflection. Just wanted to know if you did that yet.
No, we'll get it now.
All good.
So I'm really happy that this made it this far. This is a success for sure so far. And can't wait to see docking not too long from now. A day. But I'm going to take a break for a moment, and when I come back, we are going to talk about how Apollo got Apollo's name. Project Apollo. I mean, there's other reasons, but the people that mattered, the people that knew about West Africa, they had a hand in it. I mean, imagine the crews of Apollo filming the temples of Apollo from
the right configuration
orbit
for the orbital
during
insertion
the Apollo
burn.
missions.
Now less than 5 minutes away. Starliner's currently
That's what
about
happened.
102 miles above the Mediterranean Sea,
See you in a
heading
bit.
southeast over India in the next few minutes.